Evolution. Origin of life. When we look at stars on a clear night sky, we are, in a way, looking back in time. Stellar distances are measured in light years. What we see today is an object whose emitted light started its journey millions of years back and from trillions of kilometers away and reaching our eyes now. However, when we see objects in our immediate surroundings, we see them instantly enhanced in the present time. Therefore, when we see stars, we apparently are peeping into the past. The origin of life is considered a unique event in the history of universe. The universe is vast. Relatively speaking, the earth itself is almost only a speck. The universe is very old, almost 20 billion years old. Huge clusters of galaxies comprise the universe. Galaxies contain stars and clouds of gas and dust. Considering the size of universe, Earth is indeed a speck. The Big Bang Theory attempts to explain to us the origin of universe. It talks of a singular huge explosion unimaginable in physical terms. The universe expanded and hence the temperature came down. Hydrogen and helium formed sometime later. The gases condensed under gravitation and formed the galaxies of the present-day universe. In the solar system of the Milky Way galaxy, Earth was supposed to have been formed about 4.5 billion years back. There was no atmosphere on early Earth. Water vapor, methane, carbon dioxide, and ammonia released from molten mass covered the surface. The UV rays from the sun broke up water into hydrogen and oxygen, and the lighter H2 escaped. Oxygen combined with ammonia and methane to form water, CO2, and others. The ozone layer was formed. As it cooled, the water vapor fell as rain to fill all the depressions and form oceans. Life appeared 500 million years after the formation of Earth, that is, almost 4 billion years back. Did life come from outer space? Some scientists believe that it came from outside. Early Greek thinkers thought units of life called spores were transferred to different planets including Earth. Panspermia is still a favorite idea for some astronomers. For a long time, it was also believed that life came out of decaying and rotting matter like straw, mud, etc. This was the theory of spontaneous generation. Louis Pasteur, by careful experimentation, demonstrated that life comes only from pre-existing life. He showed that in pre-sterilized flasks, life did not come from killed yeast, while in another flask open to air, new living organisms arose from killed yeast. Spontaneous generation's theory was dismissed once and for all. However, this did not answer how the first life form came on Earth. Russian scientist Oparin and scientist of England Haldane proposed that the first form of life could have come from pre-existing non-living organic molecules, for example, RNA, protein, etc. And that formations of life was precised by chemical evolutions, that is, formations of diverse organic molecules from inorganic constituents. The conditions on Earth were high temperature, volcanic storms, reducing atmosphere containing CH4, NH3, etc. In 1953, S.L. Miller, an American scientist, created similar conditions in a laboratory scale. He created electric discharge in a closed flask containing CH4, H2, NH3 and water vapor at 800 degrees Celsius. observed formation of amino acids. In similar experiments, others observed formations of sugar, nitrogen bases, pigment, and fats. Analysis of meteorite content also revealed similar compounds, indicating that similar processes are occurring elsewhere in space. With this limited evidence, the first part of the conjectured story, that is, chemical evolutions, was more or less accepted. We have no idea about the first self-replicating metabolic capsule of life arose. The first non-cellular forms of life could have originated 3 billion years back. They would have been giant molecules, that is, RNA, protein, polysaccharides, etc. These capsules reproduced their molecules perhaps. The first cellular form of life did not possibly originate till about 2000 million years ago. These were probably single cells. All life forms were in water environment only. This version of a biogenesis, that is, the first form of life, arose slowly through evolutionary forces from non-living molecules are accepted by majority. However, once formed, how the first cellular forms of life could have evolved into the complex biodiversity of today is the fascinating story. Evolutions of life forms a theory. Conventional religious literature tells us about the theory of spatial creations. This theory has three connotations. One, that all living organisms, that is, species or types, that we see today were created as such. Two, that diversity was always the same since creations and will be the same in the future also. 3. That Earth is about 4000 years old. All these ideas were strongly challenged during the 19th century. Based on observation made during a sea voyage in a sail ship called HMS Beagle round the world, Charles Darwin concluded that existing living forms share similarities to varying degrees not only among themselves but also with life forms that existed millions of years ago. Many such life forms do not exist anymore. There had been extinctions of different life forms in the years gone by, just as new forms of life arose at different periods of the history of the earth. There has been a gradual evolution of life forms. Any population has a built-in variation in characteristics. Those characteristics which enable some to survive better in natural conditions, that is, climate, food, physical factors, etc., would outbreed others that are less endowed to survive under such natural conditions. Another word used is the fitness of the individual or populations. Fitness, according to Darwin, refers ultimately and only to reproductive fitness. Hence, those who are a better fit in an environment leave more progeny than others. Therefore, these will survive more and hence are selected by nature. He called it natural selection and implied it as a mechanism of evolution. Let us also remember that Alfred Wallace, a naturalist who worked in Malay archipelago, had also come to similar conclusions around the same time. In due course of time, new type of organisms are recognizable. All the existing life forms share similarities and share common ancestors. However, these ancestors were present at different periods in the history of the earth, that is, epochs, periods, and eras. The geological history of the earth closely correlates with the biological history of the Earth. A common permissible conclusion is that Earth is very old, not thousands of years as were thought earlier, but billions of years old. What are the evidences for evolution? Evidence is that the evolutions of life forms has indeed taken place on Earth has come from many quarters. Fossils are remains of hard parts of life forms found in rocks. Rocks form sediments and a cross-sections of the earth crust indicates the arrangement of sediments one over the other during the long history of the earth. Different aged rock sediments contain fossils of different life forms that probably died during the formations of the particular sediment. Some of them appear similar to modern organisms. They represent extinct organisms, that is, example, dinosaurs. A study of fossils in different sedimentary layers indicates the geological period in which they existed. The studies show that life forms varied over time and certain life forms are restricted to certain geological time spans. Hence, new forms of life have arisen at different times in the history of the earth. All this is called paleontological evidence. Embryological support for evolutions was also proposed by Ernst Haeckel based upon the observations of certain features during the embryonic stage common to all vertebrates that are absent in adults. For example, the embryos of all vertebrates, including humans, develop a row of vestigial gill slit just behind the head, but it is a functional organ only in fish and not found in other adult vertebrates. However, this proposal was disapproved by the careful study performed by Karl and Swan Baer. He noted that embryos never pass through the adult stages of other animals. Comparative anatomy and morphology show similarities and differences among organisms of today and those that existed years ago. Such similarities can be interpreted to understand whether common ancestors were shared or not. For example, whales, bats, cheetahs, and humans, that is, all mammals, share similarities in the patterns of bones forelimbs. Though these forelimbs perform different functions in these animals, they have similar anatomical structures. All of them have a humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges in their forelimbs. Hence, in this animal, the same structure developed in different directions due to adaptations to different needs. This is divergent evolutions and these structures are homologous. Homology indicates common ancestry. Other examples are vertebrate hearts or brains. In plants also, the thorns and tendrils of bougainvillea and cucurbita represent homology. Homology is based on divergent evolutions, whereas analogy refers to a situation exactly opposite. The wings of butterflies and of birds look alike. They are not anatomically similar structures, though they perform similar functions. Hence, analogous structures are a result of convergent evolutions, different structures evolving for the same functions and hence having similarities. Other examples of analogy are the eye of the octopus and of mammals or the flippers of penguins and dolphins. One can say that it is the similar habitat that has resulted in the selection of similar adaptive features in the different groups of organisms but towards the same function. Sweet potato, that is root modifications, and potato, that is stem modifications, is another example for analogy. In the same line of argument, similarities in proteins and genes performing a given functions among diverse organisms give clues to common ancestry. These biochemical similarities point to the same shared ancestry as structural similarities among diverse organisms. Man has bred selected plants and animals for agriculture, horticulture, sports, or security. Man has domesticated many wild animals and crops. This intensive breeding program has created breeds that differ from other breeds, for example, dogs, but still are of the same group. It is argued that if within hundreds of years man could create new breeds, could not nature have done the same over millions of years? Another interesting observation supporting evolutions by natural selections comes from England. In a collection of moths made in 1850s, that is before industrialization set in, it was observed that there were more white-winged moths on trees than dark-winged or melanized moths. However, in the collection carried out from the same area, but after industrialization, that is in 1920, there were more dark-winged moths in the same area. That is, the proportions was reversed. The explanation put forth for these observations was the predators will spot a moth against a contrasting background. During the post-industrialization period, the tree trunks become dark due to industrial smoke and shoots. Under these conditions, the white-winged moth did not survive due to predators. The dark-winged or melanized moth survived. Before industrialization set in, thick growth of almost white-colored lichens covered the trees. In that background, the white-winged moth survived, but the dark-colored moth was picked out by predators. Do you know that lichens can be used as industrial pollution indicators? They will not grow in areas that are polluted. Hence, moths that we are able to camouflage them, that is, hide in the background, survive. This understanding is supported by the fact that in areas where industrializations did not occur, example, in rural areas, the count of melanic moths was low. This shows that in a mixed populations, those that can better adapt, survive and increase in population size. Remember that no variant is completely wiped out. Similarly, excess use of herbicides, pesticides, etc. has only resulted in selections of resistant varieties in a much lesser time scale. This is also true for microbes against which we employ antibiotics or drugs against eukaryotic organisms or cells. Hence, resistance organisms or cells are appearing in a time scale of months or years and not on centuries. These are examples of evolution by anthropogenic action. These also tell us that evolution is not a directed process in the sense of determinism. It is a stochastic process based on change event in nature and change mutation in the organisms. What is adaptive radiation? During his journey, Darwin went to Galapagos Island. There he observed an amazing diversity of creatures. Of particular interest, small black birds, later called Darwin finches, amazed him. He realized that there were many varieties of finches on the same island. All the varieties, he conjectured, evolved on the island itself. From the original seed-eating features, many other forms with altered beak arose, enabling them to become insectivorous and vegetarian finches. This process of evolution of different species in a given geographical area, starting from a point and radiating to other areas of geography, that is, habitats, is called adaptive radiations. Darwin's finches represent one of the best examples of this phenomenon. Another example is Australian marsupials. A number of marsupials each different from the other, evolved from an ancestral stock, but all within the Australian island continent. When more than one adaptive radiations appeared to have occurred in an isolated geographical area, that is, representing different habitats, one can call this convergent evolution. Placental mammals in Australia also exhibit adaptive radiation in evolving into varieties of such placental mammals, each of which appears to be similar to a corresponding marsupial. For example, placental wolf and Tasmania wolf marsupial. Biological evolution. Evolution by natural selection, in a true sense, would have started when cellular forms of life with differences in metabolic capability originated on Earth. The essence of Darwinian theory about evolution is natural selection. The rate of appearance of new forms is linked to the life cycles or the lifespan. Microbes that divide fast have the ability to multiply and become millions of individuals within hours. A colony of bacteria, that is, say A, growing on a given medium has built-in variation in terms of the ability to utilize a feed component. A change in the medium composition would bring out only that part of the population, that is, say B, that can survive under the new conditions. In due course of time, this variant populations outgrows the others and appears as new species. This would happen within days. For the same thing to happen in a fish or fowl would take millions of years, as the lifespans of these animals are in years. Here we say that the fitness of B is better than that of A under the new conditions. Nature selects for fitness. One must remember that so-called fitness is based on characteristics that are inherited. Hence, there must be a genetic basis for getting selected and evolving. Another way of saying the same thing is that some organisms are better adapted to survive in an otherwise hostile environment. Adaptive ability is inherited. It has a genetic basis. Fitness is the end result of the ability to adapt and get selected by nature. Branching descent and natural selections are the two key concepts of the Darwinian theory of evolution. Even before Darwin, a French naturalist, Lamarck, had said that the evolutions of life forms had occurred but was driven by the use and disuse of organs. He gave the examples of giraffes, who in an attempt to forage leaves on tall trees had to adapt by elongations of their neck. As they pass on these acquired characters of elongated neck to succeed generations, giraffes slowly over the years came to acquire long necks. Nobody believes this conjecture anymore. Is evolution a process or the result of a process? The world we see, inanimate and animate, is only the success story of evolution. When we describe the story of this world, we describe evolution as a process. On the other hand, when we describe the story of life on Earth, we treat evolution as a consequence of a process called natural selection. We are still not very clear whether to regard evolution and natural selection as processes or end result of unknown processes. It is possible that the work of Thomas Malthus on populations influenced Darwin. Natural selection is based on certain observations which are factual. For example, natural resources are limited, populations are stable in size, except for seasonal fluctuations, and members of a population vary in characteristics. That is, in fact, no two individuals are alike. Even though they look superficially similar, most of the variations are inherited, etc. The fact that theoretical population size will grow exponentially if everybody reproduce maximally, that is, this fact can be seen in a growing bacterial populations, and the fact that population sizes in reality are limited means that there had been competitions for resources. Only some survived and grew at the cost of others that could not flourish. The novelty and brilliant insight of Darwin was this. He asserted that variations, which are heritable and which make resource utilizations better for few, that is adapted to habitat better, will enable only those to reproduce and leave more progeny. Hence, for a period of time, over many generations, survivors will leave more progeny and there would be a change in population characteristics and hence new forms appear to arise. Mechanism of evolution. What is the origin of this variation and how does speciations occur? Even though Mendel had talked of inheritable factors influencing phenotype, Darwin's either ignored these observations or kept silence. In the first decade of 20th century, Hugo Darwin, based on his work on evening primrose, brought forth the ideas of mutations, large differences arising suddenly in a population. He believed that it is mutation which causes evolution and not the minor variations, that is heritable, that Darwin's talk about. Mutations are random and directionless, while Darwinian variations are small and directional. Evolutions for Darwin was gradual, while Darwin believed mutations caused speciations and hence called it saltations, that is single-step large mutations. Studies in population genetics later brought out some clarity. Hardy-Weinberg principle. In a given population, one can find out the frequency of occurrence of alleles of a gene or a locus. This frequency is supposed to remain fixed and even remain the same throughout generations. Hardy-Weinberg's principle stated it using algebraic equations. This principle says that allele frequencies in a population are stable and are constant from generation to generation. The gene pool, that is, total genes and their alleles in a population, remains constant. This is called genetic equilibrium. Sum total of all the allelic frequencies is 1. Individual frequencies, for example, can be named P, Q, etc. In a diploid, P and Q represent the frequency of allele A and allele A. The frequency of AA individuals in a population is simply P square. This is simply stated in another way, that is, the probability that an allele A with a frequency of P appears on both the chromosomes of a diploid individual is simply the product of the probabilities, that is P square. Similarly, AA is Q square of AA to PQ. Hence, P square plus 2PQ plus Q square equal to 1. This is binomial expansion of P plus Q the whole square. When the frequency measured differs from expected values, the differences, that is direction, indicates the extent of evolutionary change. Disturbance in genetic equilibrium or Hardy-Weinberg's equilibrium, that is, change of frequency of alleles in a population would then be interpreted as resulting in evolution. 5 factors are known to affect Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. These are gene migration or gene flow, genetic drift, mutations, genetic recombinations, and natural selection. When the migration of a selection of the populations to another place and populations occurs, gene frequency change in the original as well as in the new population. New genes or alleles are added to the new populations and these are lost from the old population. There would be a gene flow if this gene migration happens multiple times. If the same change occurs by change, it is called genetic drift. Sometimes the change in allele frequency is so different in the new sample of the population that they become a different species. The original drift populations becomes founders and the effect is called the founder effect. Microbial experiments show that pre-existing advantageous mutations when selected will result in the observations of new phenotypes. Over a few generations, this would result in speciation. Natural selection is a process in which heritable variations enabling better survival and unable to reproduce and leave greater number of progeny. The critical analysis makes us believe that variation due to mutations or variation due to recombinations during the gametogenesis or due to gene flow or genetic drift result in a change frequency of genes and alleles in the future generations. Coupled to enhance reproductive success, natural selections make it look like a different population. Natural selection can lead to stabilization, that is, in which more individuals acquire mean character value. Directional change, that is, more individuals acquire value other than the mean character value. Or disruption, that is, more individual acquires peripheral characters value at both ends of the distribution curve. A brief account of evolution. About 2000 million years ago, that is Maya, the first cellular forms of life appeared on Earth. The mechanism of how non-cellular aggregates of giant macromolecules could evolve into cell with membranous envelope is not known. Some of these cells had the ability to release O2. The reactions could have been similar to the light reactions in photosynthesis where water is split with the help of solar energy captured and channelized by appropriate light harvesting pigments. Slowly, single-celled organisms become multicellular life forms. By the time of 500 Maya, that is, everywhere when Maya comes peak as million years ago, invertebrates were formed and active. Jawless fish probably evolved around 350 Maya. Seaweeds and few plants existed probably around 320 Maya. We are told that the first organisms that invaded land were plants. They were widespread on land when animals invaded land. Fish with stout and strong fins could move on land and go back to water. This was about 350 Maya. In 1938, a fish caught in South Africa happened to be coelacanth, which was thought to be extinct. These animals, called lobophians, evolved into the first amphibians that lived on both land and water. There are no specimens of these left with us. However, these were ancestors of modern days frogs and salamanders. The amphibians evolved into reptiles. They lay thick shelled eggs which do not dry up in sun unlike those of amphibians. Again, we only see their modern days descendants, the turtles, tortoise and crocodiles. In the next 200 million years or so, reptiles of different shape and sizes dominated on Earth. Giant furnace, that is, pteridophytes, were present but they all fell to form coal deposits slowly. Some of these land reptiles went back into water to evolve into fish-like reptiles probably 200 Maya, that is, Ichthyosaurus. The land reptiles were, of course, the dinosaurs. The biggest of them, that is, Tyrannosaurus rex, was about 20 feet in height and had huge fearsome dagger-like teeth. About 65 Maya, the dinosaur suddenly disappeared from the earth. We don't know that the true reason. Some say climatic changes killed them. Some say most of them evolved into birds. The truth may live in between. Small-sized reptiles of that era still exist today. The first mammals were like shrews. Their fossils are small-sized. Mammals were viviparous and protected their unborn young inside the mother's body. Mammals were more intelligent in sensing and avoiding danger at least. When reptiles came down, mammals took over this earth. There were in South America mammals resembling horse, hippopotamus, bear, rabbit, etc. Due to continental drift, when South America joined North America, these animals were overridden by North America fauna. Due to the same continental drift, pouched mammals of Australia survived because of lack of competitions from any other mammal. Lest we forget, some mammals live wholly in water. Whales, dolphin, seal, and sea cows are some examples. Evolution of horse, elephant, dog, etc. are special stories of evolution. You will learn about this in higher classes. The most successful story is the evolution of man with language skill and self-consciousness. A rough sketch of the evolution of life forms, their times on a geological scale, is indicated in figure. Origin and evolution of man. About 15 Maya, that is Maya million years ago, primates called Dryopithecus and Ramapithecus were existing. They were hairy and walked like gorillas and chimpanzees. Ramapithecus was more man-like, while Dryopithecus was more ape-like. Few fossils of man-like bones have been discovered in Ethiopia and Tanzania. These revealed hominid features, leading to the belief that about 3-4 Maya, man-like primates walked in eastern Africa. They were probably not taller than 4 feet but walked upright. 2 Maya Australopithecines probably lived in East Africa grasslands. Evidence shows they hunted with stone weapons but essentially ate fruit. Some of the bones among the bones discovered were different. This creature was called the first human-like being the hominid and was called Homo habilis. The brain capacities were between 650 to 800 cc. They probably did not eat meat. Fossils discovered in Java in 1891 revealed the next stage, that is Homo erectus, about 1.5 Maya. Homo erectus had a large brain around 900 cc. Homo erectus probably ate meat. The Neanderthal man with a brain size of 1400 cc lived in Near East and Central Asia between 1 lakh to 40,000 years back. They used hide to protect their body and buried their dead. Homo sapiens arose in Africa and moved across continents and developed into distinct races. During Ice Age between 75,000 to 10,000 years ago, modern Homo sapiens arose. Prehistoric cave art developed about 18,000 years ago. One such cave paintings by prehistoric humans can be seen at Bhimbetka rock shelter in Raisen district of Madhya Pradesh. Agriculture came around 10,000 years back and human settlements started. The rest of what happened is part of human history of growth and decline of civilization.